Two guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
The only way to kill this beast is to do what the Eagles did and what the Cowboys did. You put them away, and you create no opportunity for any fourth quarter magic. You are so far ahead, there's nothing they can do. That's how, and I think that's how it's eventually going to end for them. It's not going to be this 3-hour roller coaster in the wild card round, divisional round, conference championship, Super Bowl. At some point along the way to the Super Bowl, somebody is going to squish them, and they're not going to have a chance to pull off that dramatic victory at the end. That's my prediction, and I will own it. Old takes exposed if I'm wrong.
Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk Live there. He's also a huge Vikings fan, right?
Yes.
He kind of like loves the Vikings.
He does. Yes. He's very, very tortured.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of us are if you've been following the Vikings.
But I mean, he's not like an outsider who's just chiming in. He's invested.
Yeah. Well, there's some really interesting fodder here in the are the Vikings frauds or not discussion bin that we can get to. We'll also talk to our friend, the biggest Vikings fan we know, later on in the show today, Randy in Cottage Grove with a stud stable. Judd has a pecking order. This is Mackey and Judd, daily Minnesota sports, entertainment, therapy, speculation. We did do a deep dive into the current Twins rumors with Patrick Royce. You can find that episode as well if you're interested in the Twins hot stove. But as you wake up this morning here and you pull open the, like Action Network or any sort of odds report, the Vikings, the 10-2 Minnesota Vikings, going on the road to play a 5-7 Detroit Lions team. So they are 5 games ahead of the Lions in the standings. And you could say, well, but the Lions have won like 4 out of 5. No, so have the Vikings. The Vikings have won like 8 out of 9 or something, right? The Lions in most sports books are 2.5-point favorites over the Minnesota Vikings in this game. So to me, a line like that screams that a lot of smart people, Vegas, a lot of the analytics reports that we continue to see the Vikings as not as good as their record. What do you make of this? Because now, again, this game against the Jets, the Vikings were outgained by 200 some yards and found a way to win. And for people that didn't watch the game, you watch SportsCenter or whatever, you watch clips on social media, and the highlight you see is, here's Mike White dropping back to pass, chance to win the game, and oh, God, Berrios drops the ball in the end zone, right? Oh, the Vikings got lucky. So they're underdogs against the Lions. Most talking heads around the country think that they're frauds of some kind. What do you make of this? We're in December at this point.
So frauds is too strong of a word, because frauds means that we just think they're just, blah, which is not accurate. I think that the doubters stew, though, has never been stronger. Like, if you are making, if you're at home preparing for the holiday season, a doubter stew, right? It's on the stove and you need the ingredients.
A hater casserole.
Yeah, exactly. Think about what can go into the doubter stew. It's perfect. Because you've got, a team that wins games, but they win them all close. And they're, point differential, which I think we all agree in all sports is important, is what for the Vikings? Plus 10 for a team that's won.
It's
10.
It's not important in like it doesn't matter in the standings, but to me it's point differential kind of tells you what may happen going forward. Yeah.
So you sprinkle that in your stew, though, is my point. You put that in there, and then you've got the Dallas game, and to a certain point the Philly game as well, but the Dallas game is a huge game of doubt. You lost by 37 at home. I mean, you sprinkle that in, and now it's like, and Dallas is in your conference playing really well, and Dallas is basically what Dallas has done with their win against the Colts, who I know stink, with their win against the Vikings, which was really impressive. What Dallas has done is Dallas is answering the questions that the experts want answered, right? Can you score points? Absolutely. Are you playing well defensively? Yes. And so I totally get why there is doubt about the Vikings, and I totally get the skepticism. All right. But if you've eye tested this thing and watched it, it's not all just a fluke. The fourth quarters, I mean, Phil, you went through a litany, I think it was last Thursday, of fourth quarter Kirk stats. At some point in time, those aren't just, oh, they're all a fluke. No, they're not. At some point in time, they are as real as the fake stats were previously. And so from a national outside perspective, I totally get why the Vikings are being doubted. And I not only get it, I actually empathize with it. But when you go below the surface, as we talked about on Monday's show, of the situational football, extremely important.
I feel like every time someone says that, we do contractually have.
I mean,
to play
and the Vikings, you know what? To their credit, every Friday they have a situational masters meeting at which they go through weird situations from around the league, watch film, and then go practice those things. So preparation is huge here.
They seem very prepared in key moments.
The old phrase, I believe, is you make your own luck, right? You make your own luck. And so have the Vikings gotten fortunate? Have they gotten luck? Absolutely. But just like a year ago, where I think that they certainly got some bad breaks, but they created those themselves as well. They didn't help themselves. God helps those who help themselves. The Vikings have done a very good job of being prepared. And you know, I would love to see them play complete games. And yes, it would be fun if they would blow teams out. But all of that being said, in crunch time, when it gets to the fourth quarter, they are extremely impressive. So could Florio be right? Could they get to a game against the Cowboys again and get absolutely just whacked? Yes, they could. But this whole fraud or not, or are they good or not conversation to me is not a surface level conversation. It's a layered one. And I'm not willing to dismiss this team completely based on the fact that on the surface level, it looks unsustainable.
I guess my question back to the fraud crowd here, the people that think the Vikings are frauds. Would you feel better if instead of a 10-2 record, would you feel better if they were 9-3, if they got their comeuppance a little bit more for walking this tightrope? Okay, maybe the Buffalo game goes the wrong way, or maybe the Jets game. Although I would say, like, well, the Buffalo game, the Vikings, because they were still pushing forward in the second half of that game, the Vikings, without really luck or anything it was a normal football game. They fell behind, then they started pushing back.
Right.
And then they had the ball on the 1-inch line with a chance with a quarterback sneak to just win the game. They came up short on a quarterback sneak, which I would say is pretty unlucky. Like that's probably a touchdown 7 or 8 times out of 10 when you're on the doorstep. So the luck kind of goes both ways. But if the Vikings were 8-4 instead of 9-3, the Vikings would still, if the Vikings were 8-4 right now, I guess the Niners would technically have jumped them for the 2 seed, but they would still be the 3 seed with a multiple game lead in the division. They'd have a 3-game lead coasting in the division. They would have the number 3 seed set to play a home playoff game. So, like, okay, if it makes the doubters feel better, let's say the Vikings have gotten lucky by like a game or two in that you're just not going to go 9-0 in 1-score games. All right, maybe they're more like an 8-4 football team, to which I say that's still pretty damn good, and they're still tracking for like 11 or 12 wins based on the remaining games in their schedule. And not to mention, the Vikings, among the 7 playoff teams, the Vikings have the toughest strength of schedule in the NFC. Their strength of schedule is a .530 winning percentage on average, and they've played the 4 best defenses in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Their strength of victory is one of the best in the NFL. It's just shy of a 500 strength. That, like, the opponents they've defeated are just shy of collectively 500, and they've had to play both conference number 1 seeds so far, in the Philadelphia Eagles and the Buffalo Bills, who are currently tied for the 1 seed in the AFC. So if I were to tell you before the season, hey, boy, 12 games in, the Vikings are going to have the toughest strength of schedule of any of the top 7 or 8 teams in the NFC, what are their wins going to look like? I would say, we're probably going to be grinding wins, right? Like, if they're playing that tough of a schedule and they're going to play the top 4 or 5 defenses and pass rushes in the league, they're probably not going to have pretty victories. They're going to be grinding it in the fourth quarter. So give me a slate of like 5 or 6 crappy teams in a row. let's say the Vikings were the lineup. All right, 4 straight games. Going to play the Falcons. Going to play this version of the Rams. Give me another game against the Bears, which they will have, and then maybe like the Broncos and the Texans or something, or the Steelers.
Yep.
They'd probably have a couple blowout wins mixed in there, but they're not playing those teams.
The experts aren't comfortable with how they win games. The formula that they have used so far, including, which is remarkable, 9 consecutive wins by 1 score, makes the experts uncomfortable because they look at that and say, what happened to you against Dallas is going to take place again. My argument there, and I am not assuring that it won't, but my argument having, and we've all watched a ton of football for a long time, is this. When you get to the playoffs, it's a different animal. You need to win 1 game. So like Dallas, the Dallas game was a disaster, but it comes in a multitude of games week after week. And yes, you're going to have bad games. Hopefully not that bad, but the Vikings did. But when you get to the playoffs, you know what you need to be prepared for? 1 game. You know what you need to figure out how to win 1 game and beat 1 team each week. And while that's incredibly tough, I also think that we tend to look at potential playoff runs sometimes as, well, it's just an extension of the regular season. It's not. It's totally different. And I'm going to give you guys a great case in point here. I'm going to harken back to some very painful childhood memories, at least for Phil. Probably not Dex.
Oh, no.
98.
Is this the time where I peed my pants in the hallway in first grade?
Nope. But
or
it's the
threw
time
up
that you
on
cried.
my way to the nurse's office in 3rd grade?
Oh, man, there's nothing worse than throwing up as a kid, and then they put that gross salt dust down or
Dude,
whatever.
I was
it is, and
like
it
5
smells
steps away from the nurse's office door. I almost made it.
Oh,
I once
that was
had a
like me on
kid-
Purple Daily yesterday.
No, but you,
I made it to the
no.
bathroom.
I once had a kid puke by me on a bus, and they put that
Oh.
that
Oh,
stuff
that
down.
salt. I've
And,
been
like,
at
I
bars
was-
where that happens.
I was just like, no, that makes it worse. That makes
Uh-huh.
it way worse. Anyway, a time that Phil cried. 98 Vikings, okay?
Hmm.
That team was superior to the Falcons. The 98 Falcons were not that great. But what did they do? They figured out how to win and hang around, because at halftime, again, that game looked like it was probably done. They figured out how to hang around and win. So I think this notion of dismissing the Vikings as frauds or as is sort of ridiculous, in the sense that, there comes a point in time where the karma converges for your team or for a team, where you start to say there's something going on here. Like, it goes beyond the norm. And in my opinion, that's this team. They're prepared. They certainly have good fortune. And do I think that Kevin O'Connell and his staff could prepare these Vikings to win some individual playoff games? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Starting off with this,
I agree.
don't forget, God bless him, but the old Zim would get very uptight as games approach. The team would play tight at times. He's keeping them as loose as you can possibly be. And I guarantee you, privately, he loves this. He loves this lack of respect. It is playing into, he doesn't even have to talk about it, so it doesn't seem cliched, because it's real. I think that it's perfect to get zero respect for a team that I think could be prepared enough to win games, largely depending on one thing, though, the quarterback. Can you keep him playing in key moments like he's playing right now?
Are they overachievers to a degree? Sure. They've overachieved from a record standpoint to a degree. If you want to look at expected wins, losses, if you really want to get extra nerdy, which is a formula used on Pro Football Reference. Actually, it's the Pythagorean expectation, which is Bill James's theory. Again, very nerdy here, extremely nerdy if you want to get down the weeds. But the it basically, what expected wins, losses, it takes your points allowed and points scored and makes a little bit of a formula of a record, which is the easiest way I can dumb that down. The Vikings' expected wins, losses this season is 6.3 and 5.7. So really, let's change that to 6 and 6. From their points scored and points allowed, they should be 6 and 6 basically this season. They're 10 and 2 instead, because they've won a lot of close games. And sometimes with football, that's how this works. There was a stretch. I know the Ravens right now can't score a lot of points, and Lamar Jackson got injured. There was a stretch where the Ravens should have been undefeated in the first 7 games. They got off to great leads. They scored a ton of points in the first 3 quarters, and then they absolutely collapsed in the 4th. Same with the Vikings to a degree last season, right? They had numerous 10-point double-digit leads that they blew. sometimes this just comes down to the football gods being on your side. And this is where, honestly, the NFC karma gods are now gifting the Vikings a path here, which is even more amazing with the latest injury news to San Francisco, with them getting the NFC North basically wrapped up by this weekend, essentially. You're capitalizing on this luck. And if for right now, have you overachieved? Sure, but you don't have to apologize, and you definitely can bank on the fact that you're probably going to have a home playoff game, potentially two, if you win on Wild Card Weekend.
You know, I love that you brought up the Bill James Pythagorean wins model. It started off as a baseball thing, like in the 70s when Bill James was one of the pioneers of modern day analytics, and he was one of the first to sort of highlight, run differential and how over the course of time in 162 games, generally, if you are getting outscored by your opponent over a 6-month baseball season, your record will be below 500 once the dust settles. But that's a 162 game baseball season is where this originated from, where you have all sorts of time for the best teams. In baseball, it's very rare that you get to the end of a season, there's a fraudulent team with like 90 wins. Sometimes you would look at a team and say, oh, that team they're like 8 games better than their run differential. But when you dig deeper, it's because they're winning close games because they have an awesome bullpen or something. Right. Or they take very disciplined at bats and draw walks and get guys on base late in games, whatever it is. And when you try to take this theory to a football season of only 17 games, weird things can happen. Or you can get teams like the Vikings that are just really well prepared. Hey, we need a drive right now. No penalties, no holding, no false starts. Find Justin Jefferson. They do it week after week after week where we need a drive right now in the fourth quarter offensively. Let's do it. How many times have you seen Vikings teams under Mike Zimmer recently that just derailed with throwing the wrong pass to a check down or a holding call or a false start, and all of a sudden now it's 2nd and 17. So being well prepared in close games is a skill with maybe a sprinkling of luck, I would say. So, and I'll throw one more example at you on the other side. There was a Timberwolves team like 10 years ago that had an expected wins-losses record of they should have been like a 49 or 50 win team because they had one of the best point differentials in basketball. It was the Kevin Love, Ricky Rubio, kind of Rick Adelman era.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they finished 40 and 42. They finished like 10 games worse than their expected record based on point differential. Oh, man, how unlucky is that? Well, if you watch those games, how many times did that Timberwolves team have a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter, a 20-point lead in the third, and piss down their legs because they didn't know what they were doing late in the game, right?
But that's the problem is that I understand that the metrics are helpful at times and that we can sometimes derive answers, but I don't think the fourth quarter thing is luck. Like last year, the Vikings blew games. They weren't like that. That drove me crazy. They're unlucky. No, they're not. They're blowing games. I'm never going to give you credit for blowing a game because, luck is guys staying healthy. Luck is a fortuitous bounce here and there occasionally, not every week. And the fourth quarter success of the Vikings is not luck. So like that's the problem is the advanced metrics don't understand that. They can't figure that out. So like that's where the combination of you, the person, have to come together with the statistics and advanced metrics and derive what's going on here. The fourth quarter stuff, the 2022 Vikings in the fourth quarter are not lucky. Now, are they fortunate their defense doesn't break more? Yes, but is that luck or is that they don't break? Like that's a whole conversation.
Another thing is, if you get a key interception late in a game against the Bills or whoever, you could say, "Well, boy, if you hadn't gotten that interception, you would have lost that game." And you're not always going to get the interception. But then you hear Patrick Peterson talk on his podcast after the Bills game and say, "Oh, I put in a bunch of film study, and here's a 5-minute detailed breakdown of why I intercepted that pass." Oh,
yes.
Makes
okay.
sense.
You were prepared to intercept that pass. Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Bynum on Instagram put out his pick and how he had on the 1st of December prepared for that play. So like it's the whole thing of on a piece of notebook paper. And that's the thing is, that's preparation. Now, were they fortunate Mike White was quarterbacking the Jets? Probably, but it's not like the league is full of Marinos.
Well,
so
Judd, they would have won that game by 3 touchdowns if Zach Wilson was quarterbacking.
Yeah, but that's what I'm
So
going to say.
maybe they got unlucky that Mike White was quarterbacking.
But those picks weren't luck. Those picks were actually preparation. So anyway, but if I'm the Vikings, and I guarantee you O'Connell loves this, it's absolutely perfect because there's nothing better than real doubters and haters, right? Like it's one thing to try and come up with this, as a lot of coaches do, narrative that people don't believe, but he's got it going for him. Everyone's saying it.
Last thing too, and this is where, like, just watching Joe Burrow since basically the playoff run last year now into this year, this dude just has a way of figuring out ways to win games. Yep. Like I was listening to a podcast yesterday about every good quarterback has like a certain skill set or certain thing about them that is really good. Like Patrick Mahomes can make anything happen, right? Like Peyton Manning was such a great pocket passer. When you watch Joe Burrow, like he's very good at football. I'm not discrediting him. I take him right behind Patrick Mahomes if I'm being honest. But there isn't that one certain skill set necessarily that he has, I think, from throwing a football. He has this moxie and this belief that we're going to win this game. I might have been sacked 8 times today by the Titans. We're still going to win this game. And that type of belief, and Joe is certainly not, Kirk Cousins is certainly not Joe Burrow, but that type of moxie can be sustainable and can be like basically used to your advantage. And the Vikings are figuring out ways to use that to their advantage.
Yeah, the Bengals last year. Oh, look how lucky they are. Oh, playing all these close games. And so, well, okay. Is it luck or is it Joe Burrow? Is it coaching? Kevin O'Connell having guys prepared, feeling confident. So yeah, I guess you can keep doubting, but they have 10 wins. So yeah. Do I think they're going to win the Super Bowl right now, gun to the head? No, I do not. So if that makes them frauds, okay. But they're about to win 12, 13, 14 regular season games, and they're doing some great things in the fourth quarter. A shout out to our friends over at Federated Mutual Insurance Company, helping businesses maximize their level of success for over 100 years, based in Owatonna, Minnesota. It's like having a great offensive line for your business. There's all sorts of things you're trying to focus on as a business owner. Let the big picture risk management stuff fall toward Federated so they can be that guiding hand for you. Federatedinsurance.com, where it's our business to protect yours. We got our Vikings fan friend Randy in Cottage Grove with a stud stable coming up on Mackey and Judd.